For the actors in this theatre, there's more at stake than breaking a leg. Hi guys, so before we get into it, a quick disclaimer that there will be some spoilers today, but I won't tell you who the killer turns out to be because that's like the big twist of the movie. So after watching and reviewing Frightmare the other week, my first ever Pete Walker experience, I decided to go back to the well and watch another one of his films because I really enjoyed Frightmare. This one is from earlier on in the 70s. In fact, I think it might have been Walker's first or his second horror film. But you can definitely tell that it came before Frightmare because this one is a much less polished product, especially in the visuals department. So to give you an idea of the plot, we've got 7 or 8 young theatre actors who have all been paid to go to the seaside town of Cramer in Norfolk. If you're not from the UK, Norfolk as a county is on the east coast, about halfway up. And Cramer's kind of cool because it's got its own pier and the theatre is on the pier. So these actors all turn up at the place. I think they've been contracted to do 7 or 8 weeks rehearsals and then a play at the end of it. And while this is going on, they all decide collectively to sleep at the theatre because I think all the local hotels are fully booked up or they're just too expensive. I forget which, but this arrangement works for the movie because obviously there's a killer in town and he's going to find it much easier to kill people if all the potential victims are in the one place rather than spread all over Cramer in various hotels. It's a standard slasher kind of setup, and yet I wouldn't really call it that. Being 1972, the slasher hadn't really been fully developed by this point, but if this film had come out 10 years later, it probably would have felt very different. It would have been a slasher then, in all likelihood. It ends up being a little bit more like a giallo, although I doubt that Pete Walker thought of it in those terms. Probably in his mind, he was just making a good old British chiller, albeit in his own unique style, which just happens to involve a lot of boobs and bums to go with the blood and guts. Having the characters all sleep at the theatre works just as much for Pete Walker as it does the killer, because this means that he gets to have people sleeping with each other, or if they're not sleeping with each other, then at least undressing in front of each other as they're about to go to bed, or maybe just undressing on their own and will point the camera at them for whatever reason. There's lots of nakedness in this film. There's an early scene where a woman is literally splayed over the seats in the main theatre area, boobs facing the ceiling, and people are just walking in and they don't think it's a big deal. There's a scene even before that, right at the start, where we meet these 2 women in their flat. So they're not actually a couple. I think they're just flatmates, and yet they still sleep in the same bed just because. And of course, when the doorbell rings, they have to answer it naked. So yeah, Pete Walker likes to have his actors without their clothes on quite often, especially during the first half of this movie. It's just his style. But it works against the movie a little bit because it just seems to me that everybody in this cast is a knockout 10 out of 10 when it comes to looks. And I wouldn't normally complain. It's just that I got to a point with this where I struggled to identify characters from other characters. I couldn't keep up with who was who. And what made it doubly difficult is that this is a film where there's no one main character that you get to know really well. It seems that all the actors in this, all the characters, get equal amounts of time. So I was a little bit lost after a while because all of these actors in this look like they're either a member of ABBA or a member of the Beatles. They're absolute knockouts when it comes to looks, but also a little bit indistinguishable from each other. I was reminded of watching Wrong Turn 4, which seemed to me to be a film almost about a modelling agency going on a work trip to the West Virginia mountains just before their looks are badly ruined by the mountain men in that film. This wouldn't be a problem in the Flesh and Blood show if I watched this a second time and I managed to familiarise myself a little bit with the various scenes and characters, but most people are just going to watch this once. I haven't decided yet if I'm just going to watch this once in my life, and certainly I did struggle a little bit to keep up with the characters. You've got to have some cast variety in there. I don't think it's the nakedness that's actually the problem. It's the fact that a lot of the people in this film are just the same. It becomes a little bit of an issue. Before we go on, I think the name of the town might be Cromer rather than Kramer. I might have been saying it wrong. Funny thing about this film, though, when I was doing my notes, I was writing down a lot more negatives than positives, and yet I still really enjoyed the film. And I think the reason for that imbalance, on paper anyway, is that my main reason for enjoying this kind of overrides a lot of the problems, and that would be the setting and atmosphere. There's nothing more important for me in a horror film than having a great atmosphere, and this film definitely achieves that. I was watching one of the Conjuring Universe films last night. I won't say which one, but literally nobody dies in the movie, and yet because it has such a great atmosphere, I thought it was great. I really liked it. But the Flesh and Blood show definitely scores heavy in the atmosphere department, and from a very early stage as well. We get this sweeping camera shot that just goes left to right, showing us all the seats in the auditorium. And had the whole place been lit, it still would have been quite spooky. I would have been thinking, ooh, what's this going to be like when the lights go down and you've got this massive space? But there are already pockets of darkness, even though it might be like the middle of the afternoon. The overheads can't reach everywhere in this huge room, so already there's like black spots everywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, the killer could actually be in here already. And in terms of the setting, I don't think I've seen that many horror films set in a theatre. I think the only other one would be The Gallows, a film I really like. There's a film called Stage Fright from the 80s, which I've not seen, which I believe is pretty good. But other than that, I think the next closest thing for me would be Demons, that's set in a cinema. But I can't honestly say that that's anything like the Flesh and Blood show. But I also like it that this film is set in Cromer, or I think it's Cromer, not Kramer. Anywhere, anytime a horror film is set somewhere I've not seen before, then I always like it. And this film definitely sells you the illusion that it's taking place in a theatre on a pier, because we get just enough outside shots for that, even though I think a lot of the interiors might have been filmed somewhere else, possibly down in Brighton. But not all of this film takes place inside the theatre. But when we do have lots of the stalk and slash type moments, because you don't really know what the geographical layout of the theatre would be. I mean, even somebody like me who has been in theatre, done quite a few productions in my earlier years, I still couldn't tell you the standard layout of a theatre, where all the various corridors behind the stage would lead and where the dressing rooms are and stuff like that. It's probably different in every single theatre building, right? So you can never quite get comfortable in this film. Whenever you see somebody walking around in the dark and they're on their own, you've got no comfort in your head of knowing where the other characters are. And so the film is quite effective in that way. Unfortunately, I must return to the negatives, and some of these are sufficiently large enough to certainly prevent this film ever becoming some kind of classic, in my opinion. So, to begin with, there's a flashback sequence late on in this movie which is extremely pivotal. We find out why the killer is the way that he is. So, it turns out that a few decades earlier, he came back to the theatre one night and he found his wife having sex with her lover on a settee. And in his rage, he tied up the two lovers with duct tape, tied them to each other, and put them in this little side room, and then walled it up so that they would starve to death in this room, naked, tied together. Absolutely horrendous way to die, but kind of cool for a horror movie, actually. And yet, it's really badly filmed. I would say that this is the first major mistake I've seen from this director across the two movies of his that I've watched, because I couldn't feel any horror coming through the screen at me from this flashback sequence. It's as if they just got a bunch of non-speaking extras together, and it was like, okay, we need this shot, let's try and get this done really fast so we can get back to the main actors. And there's just no effort put into it. Like, there's one moment where the wife is cowering down on the floor, kind of, and the killer goes to get her lover from another room, and she makes no attempt to escape in the foreground. And then we cut to the pair of them, like, sat together, tied together in this room that they're about to be buried in, and they're literally just sat there. They're not even like wriggling, or they certainly don't look like they think they're in any danger. And all the atmosphere is kind of lost in that moment. It's like, yeah, this could have been done a hell of a lot better. It really feels like an opportunity squandered. And also, the ending is a bit disappointing. It's a bit too much police procedural and far too little in the way of horror movie, I suppose. I think a lot of people watching this through a modern day lens who haven't seen the film before will find the conclusion to this very underwhelming indeed. If you're going to give me a horror film set in a theatre or anywhere really, then come the finale, I want to see something like Sidney Prescott blasting Mickey and Billy Loomis's mum into the front row seats. You know, I don't want to see some copper showing up and giving us an ending that's like the end of an episode of A Touch of Frost or something like that. So you could say that the way that this film pans out in its last 5 or 10 minutes is a bit old hat, I would say. And when you lump the flashback onto the ending, then you could say that the entire last 20 minutes is very unsatisfying. But I still liked the movie overall because most of everything up until then was highly enjoyable. And like I said earlier, it's got a great atmosphere. It just so happens that when I was sat there with the credits rolling down, what was a very good score at one point just kind of had to nudge down somewhat. Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror so I can show you what score I'm going to give The Flesh and Blood Show. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. This was a really good time despite the film's faults, and I would say I'm definitely up for a bit more Pete Walker. He's definitely a good director. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed Frightmare. Check out both films because they are free on YouTube. It will come as absolutely no cost to you. So I guess I will leave it there for today. Don't forget to follow me on X if you'd like. My name on there is exactly the same as this YouTube channel. And other than that, I will say cheerio, bye-bye.